I want to tell you about a new podcast called Amuse News. Publishing multiple days a week, Amuse News is your source for food news, interviews from around the food world, and more. On the show, we'll be engaging with food storytellers, from chefs to advocates to people working in the field, and many more. Find Amuse News wherever you get your podcasts. Amuse News is a destination for everyone who's looking for a new, insightful look into the world of food.
If your restaurant wants to put the best on the table, look for food with the New York State Certified Seal. It's food that is grown right here. Learn more at certified.ny.gov.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. We're a member-supported food radio network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Join our hosts as they lead you through the world of craft brewing, behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, inside the battle over school food, and beyond. Find us at heritageradionetwork.org.
Good morning. Welcome to The Line. I'm your host, Eli Sussman, co-chef and owner of Samisa Restaurant in Williamsburg. I'm coming at you live from Bushwick, and like every week, I'm going to spend the entire show today speaking one-on-one with a talented chef about his career, his childhood, his inspirations, his hopes, his fears, his dreams. You know, the normal. I'm going to grill him on his life. If you love Brooklyn food, restaurant stories, pop-ups, Asian food, Southwest flavors, and hearing what goes into developing a career that leads to becoming an executive chef of a restaurant, stick around. This episode is most definitely for you. Today, my guest is Eduardo Sandoval. He is the executive chef of Tygershark, which is located in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. Eduardo was born in El Paso, Texas. He's worked at several restaurants in New York, including Landmark, Valse, Mission Chinese, Mission Cantina. At Tygershark, it's a restaurant that's fronted by a coffee shop. It has some surfer vibes. He serves Asian-inspired dishes. They often blend his southern influences and utilizes chilies from various areas of the world to create very bold flavors. I'm a huge fan of the restaurant. I've been several times. Eduardo, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to begin by talking about your menu. I referred earlier to Asian and Southwest flavors. I'm curious how you would describe your menu. There is a corn fritter on the menu that has crab, charred scallion crema, cotija cheese, shishito peppers, right next to a hamachi sashimi bop, which is a grilled rice ball with cured mackerel, tobiko, herb salad, and gochujang. So those live side by side on your menu. Talk about menu conceptualization and how free do you run with your flavors and your dish construction?
I would say I run pretty free with everything. I kind of like to break traditions, I guess. Before I was doing Tygershark, I was doing Mexican pop-ups. So I'd say Southwest is fairly accurate. I was trying to go more of I was trying to explore the authenticity of Mexican cuisine beyond like tacos and burritos. But I am from Texas, and I do know more about Southwest flavors than I do the authentic Mexican cuisine. So the idea was the Southwest, the Mexican part of it, would shine through whatever recipes I was trying to develop in the Korean aspect of things. So the fritter was actually a play off of a traditional Korean dish, but instead of it keeping it flat, I allowed it to ferment and created some yeast and fried it, and it just puffed up to nice little balls, and you just kind of run with it.
Cool. So you're no stranger to the pop-up. You did them for quite a while amidst your various restaurant, kitchen working jobs. My brother and I, we did Samisa, our restaurant, as a pop-up, so I sort of know what it's like to move things around from apartment to bar. Yeah. It's kind of a daunting thing to set up a restaurant in a couple hours, and, you know, where do you get deliveries? It's a hassle. I think we can both agree on that. But I want to know what was your pop-up called, and also where did you do it around Brooklyn? How did it evolve?
I did, my pop-up was called El Bronquito, kind of an ode to like a family thing we got back home. And I popped up throughout, the drink was it was a home base for me. They were very welcoming, and They helped lay the foundation down for me being able to do whatever I did beyond that. I popped up at Delilah's cheesesteak place, which isn't around anymore, but they also helped me get started. And then it was mostly bars, like another place out in Friends and Lovers, and I think I did a wine bar for like 3 weeks, just one night a week. I just tried to stay moving.
Were you always just trying to get the word out about it, or was it more like you called up a friend and said, I got this cool pop-up, like, let me do it for a night. If it works, let me come back for a second night? How does it really... A lot of people, they hear the word pop-up, but they don't exactly know all the effort that goes into it. You know, they think it's more of like a restaurant kitchen takeover for a night where you come in and everything's prepped out for you and you're just like, hey man, here's my menu, let's execute it. It's not really like that.
Not at all. It was, like you said, it was very daunting, and I did it for a year, and I didn't really have a kitchen. I had to like use somebody else's kitchen. It was very much a headache. But I was trying to make something legitimate out of it. I wanted to like I wanted everybody to know where I was going to be, and I try and use social media because I couldn't afford PR. It was just me doing everything.
Right.
So I would just develop relationships, being like, using the drink as like a reference. I was like, look, usually when I come in here, I get a following of people, and just you make something good enough, like hopefully people come through. And
juxtapose the pop-up experience with working at a traditional restaurant like Landmark. Landmark is in the 50s, right? It's at Columbus Circle, so it's fine dining. It's like it's one of the Mark Murphy restaurants. Right. It's in that empire. Fairly corporate, I would assume.
Very corporate.
Okay.
That one was.
So speak a little bit about that experience relative to you illegally cooking in the drink or whatever.
Well, I mean, I was still pretty young when I was doing Landmark, and it was very corporate, and I was just coming back from Texas. And it was a good experience, but it was very stifling as far as creativity, because it was more babysitting all the people who were like older than me and probably more experienced than me. But I was their sous chef. After like 6 months of working there, like I worked up. So there was no creative outlet. And of course, at the time, I wasn't sure what I really wanted to cook, but there was no way of I'd find identity with how I wanted to find myself in the culinary world. So in the pop-ups, it was a lot more of me, which made it more of a vulnerable experience, which made it nice to work in bars because there was a little bit of alcohol to kind of
sure, there was a little bit of flavor lubrication, right?
It was like I can be a little bit creative and not have to worry about.
I am curious about the Landmark experience where you say that you were people's bosses, that you were maybe in years wise less experienced than they were, older than you. How did you earn that type of respect in a corporate kitchen environment where they're like, who's this kid bossing me around? Do you just grind it out every day, and at a certain point it turns a corner and people are like, oh shit, this guy can cook? Or what did you do? Were you really tough? Were you nurturing? How do you kind of win the room over?
That's a good question. I had to go and learn every station, and I had to learn Spanish with them, because growing up Mexican, I didn't want to learn Spanish, so I learned it in New York and mostly in this kitchen. And I had to work each station. I had to be just as good as the one next to me. And whenever I got that station down, I'd always try and help on the other one. And then I would just try and take the challenges of like, what are the challenging stations? And within time, I just learned it. And when you work next to them and you seem competent with what you're doing, and you're not trying to hold any ego over anybody, then it's a lot easier for them to like open up to you like as a peer. And then within time, I would made my way to Expo, which it was like 13 men on the line, and there was 2 Expos, one for like the apps and one for the entrees. And then I had to like Expo, which was also really hard. And as long as you pull your team out of the weeds and you know they got you, then you kind of like start winning their respect until you have to stand up and you have to like flex and yell at somebody who's like 7 feet tall.
And who's been there for 10 years and thinks they know everything.
And he's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm not backing down. But we're going to get through this together.
I'm curious about, I want to talk about your background and growing up in El Paso in a second, but being in a New York kitchen, your name is Eduardo Sandoval. Do people assume, based on your name, that you are either not an American or that you are not capable of doing the job? There is a negative connotation associated with people from South America and the United States, that they are the dishwashers of the kitchen and that they maybe aren't as skilled as other people. Did you face any negativity from people that prejudged you based on, without knowing maybe anything about you? I mean, you said you didn't speak Spanish. Did you also face some negativity from Spanish speakers as well, that you didn't speak Spanish?
There was I had to earn respect as far as like the Mexican respect, because I wasn't born in Mexico and I didn't know any Spanish, and my name was Sandoval, but I couldn't say it with a Mexican accent at the time, or Spanish accent. But most of the kitchens are Latinos. Most people do come from South America, so they do. It was easier for me to play into that and like join in with the ranks and just like work hard with them and then learn how to speak Spanish. So it wasn't more until like I had to deal with more English speaking people who were like of maybe a higher pay grade that never really thought I was Mexican. When I find an identity in my Mexican culture, and then somebody's like, "Oh yeah, what are you, like, Italian? You like half Mexican?" I'm like, "Well, kind of like grew up in the most Mexican part of Texas, and both my parents are pretty Mexican." So that's been most of the struggle of like identifying more with Mexican, but it's been pretty comforting or like welcoming that I chose a career where a lot of the people are like the paisas, like people who come over and made the hustle and chased the dream.
When you were growing up in El Paso, it's right on the border, right? So Juarez is right on the opposite side of El Paso, basically.
Correct, yeah.
So you can be in Mexico, depending on where you lived in El Paso, in a matter of minutes, right?
Yep.
Okay. I would love to hear a little bit about what your childhood was like. Were your parents born in America? If you didn't know Spanish, was it because Spanish wasn't spoken in your home, or did you just rebel against that?
Mostly rebel.
Okay. So what was childhood like for you in El Paso growing up? How did I know El Branquito has threads that reach back to your early childhood. So
well, both my parents were born in El Paso. My dad was probably first generation and my mom maybe like second generation. And there is a lot of Mexicans, second, third generation. It's just a lot of them are removed. A lot of them don't always speak Spanish. But you're just like, you identify with that more. My grandparents didn't speak any English, and for my childhood, I'm mostly connected with this. I guess we would call it a flea market. We called it the swap meet, and my grandfather had bought about an acre worth of land, and they turned it into booths or bodegas that we called them, and a majority of people would come over from Mexico, and they would want to sell their stuff and do their hustle and then go back, and it'd just be a weekend thing. But within that were like stalls. There was always Mexican food around. Obviously, some of it would be Americanized because, you gotta know your audience. But so every weekend I would grow up in this. We'd go collect, and it was like a little piece of Mexico, and everybody had like their thing that they cook. Some woman made our favorite gorditas, so that's where we go get our gorditas. And then this person did like a barbecue burrito, which is just like smoked and shredded brisket on beans, super thin, really good. He would run out, so you'd want to get there at a certain time. You had your plots on how you're going to do things. There was this thing, champurrado, that when it was cold and we had to get up and go with Dad and sit in the office, there was this like almost like a cream of wheat, but like it's like a corn masa thing, but chocolate and like some spices, and it was really heavy, but it was almost drinkable. So that's where we spent a lot of. That's where I remember being for most of my childhood until I graduated and ran out.
Were you obsessed with food, or was it just a culture of food that you were a part of?
I was pretty rebellious after my parents split, so food wasn't really something that reigned heavy in the household, or just I didn't really know much about it. I just worked with my hands. That's what we did.
Let's focus on the rebellion then. Where did that take you? How did you get out of El Paso? What led you to leave?
Just making it out on my own, really. We have two family businesses, and it seemed cool. Like they're all welders, or they're all jack of all trades, and they do a little bit of everything. But nothing in it felt creative. It was just put your head down and work. And there's nothing. I commend them for everything. It's not that. I didn't feel right for myself to just do that. So I jumped out and I left to Austin against my dad's wishes. He was like, just stay for 1 year. I was like, I'm going to have to run. And then, I find myself in Austin, and now I'm like trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was going to go to like architect school. But it was, I just wanted to, I didn't want to learn Spanish. I wanted to get out of the family business. I wanted to leave El Paso. And I just kind of wanted to see what was out there for myself.
Did you start working in Austin right away? Like, how did you bide your time?
I did. My family was out there. My mom was out there. I kind of like found shelter for a little bit until I could figure out what I was going to do, because I still didn't know what I didn't even know what I wanted to go to college for. I knew we had to go to college.
This is basically right after you finished high school.
Right after I finished. Actually, I came and visited New York. It was like a graduation gift. And even then, I was like, we tried a couple restaurants. I was like, oh, it's kind of cool. I think after one of them, I tried to go home and recreate it. Mm-hmm. But just because it seemed like a good challenge. But I was like, all right, well, I get to college, and then kind of figured out from there.
So did you end up going to college?
I started in a community college. I did about 2 years thinking I was going to do architecture.
In Austin?
In Austin, yeah.
Okay. And then where's the next step? What happens after those 2 years?
I couldn't, the same reason why I left home, I couldn't keep doing a job that I would fall asleep standing up. I was falling asleep standing up, putting videos away at a Blockbuster. I didn't drink, and I didn't smoke, I didn't do anything. I was just that bored of everything. I was like, I need to get out of this. I need to find some way to make money and take something out of it that I would enjoy doing, even if I'm not going to do it forever.
You were looking for something to be passionate about.
Yeah.
Okay. And so where did it lead you? Where did you end up?
That led me to, right before moving to Austin, I worked at an Applebee's, and that's kind of where everything started. And I was a dishwasher. That's what I rebelled against my family for, was to wash dishes. I was like, you know what? Let me try this Applebee gig. There's another guy who was driving this nice Honda. I was like, yo, dude, come work in the restaurant. Be a busser or waiter or something, and be make them tips. I was like, all right, well, I'll check it out. And all they had for me was a dishwasher. I was like, all right, I'll start there. Mm-hmm. And then in the dish pit was kind of a hustle. It was, you really had to stay on top of it. And the guys in the line I thought were really intense and crazy. And I was like, I want to get each station always has its harder station. It was a flat top station, a grill station, and then the fry station. And I remember seeing the fry guy who was maybe a year or two older than me. And I wanted to do it because it looked really hard. It looked really crazy. And the intensity and the adrenaline. And I was like, I want to get on that station. And after a month and a half or two, the manager was like, all right, have at it. If you can't keep up, we'll take you off. It's all right. I did.
Probably a lot of stuff comes off the fry station.
Everything, yeah. At Applebee's, everything's fried.
The guy in the flat top is just standing there watching you fry literally every single thing on the menu, right?
Yeah, it's like if you can get through the fry station, then yeah, you can cruise on these other two. It was kind of
the guy picking up all the fish dishes to order on the plancha is not really working that hard at Applebee's.
He's kind of just putting 3 fish and just watching them.
So you catch the itch at an Applebee's, right?
Yeah.
So you start, you hit the fryer, you work your way up. How long until you think to yourself, all right, I like cooking? Does a switch flip? Do you say, all right, that was cool, on to the next thing? Or did you kind of fall backwards into the next thing?
Well, yeah, the Applebee's thing it just piqued my curiosity, but that was in El Paso, and then I was in Austin trying to figure it out, and I was like, maybe I'll get back into the kitchens because that just seems like that'd be something that I can like get into. I try to go back to Applebee's in Austin. They're like, no, not enough experience. You're just not. We want something more. And I was like, I guess shortly after that, I was looking through the newspaper and I saw an article for like culinary school, like 1 year, in and out, get you in a restaurant. And I was like, all right, instead of like washing dishes for another 6 months and then working on another station for another 6 months, I want to just do this for like a year. And kind of like I still had no idea about food. I wasn't really cooking. I wasn't working in a restaurant. It was just, and I was still trying to go to school to be, learn architecture. So I did the school, and then that's kind of like, it kind of took off from there. Meaning was opened up to this whole world. And in my mind, I thought I was going to finish the school and then go back to culinary school or college and maybe...
What was the name of the culinary school?
Texas Culinary Academy.
And you went for a year?
1 year, yeah.
Cool. What was your favorite class? Do you remember anything specific about being at Texas Culinary?
No, I don't.
Do you think you learned a lot of stuff?
I think it helped me with a foundation of just basic knowledge, which
knife skills.
Yeah, which I had never really cut things. So it was exciting when you like build a sauce and you make like a bechamel,
and it works.
And yeah. But then I'm still like, what is a bechamel? Why am I making this? And then you have all these tools, and you start in a restaurant in New York, and it's like, oh, we don't make these things. So I spent a year learning these sauces, but you guys don't even care about that. That's
They're like, here, clean all these potatoes for the next 5 hours. Wash these greens over here.
I'm like, cool. That was a lot of money for washing. It was a unique experience. A lot of stuff happened throughout that schooling, and I actually didn't even go for the best part of the classes because I had a cousin move in with me, and we stayed out. We went a little too hard. He brought the party home always.
Gotcha. And
I was like kind of the follower in it. I was like, oh, this is cool. They like opened my world to something I'd never seen, and so he was actually my cousin was one who was like more passionate about the food. So like.
He was in culinary school with you?
He was, but he started like a block behind.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, cool. I'll just not go to these classes, and then I'll pick them up after. Thinking you could do that, like a semester. I was like, I'll miss this semester and get on the next board. And they're like, no, when you're in, you're in. I'm like, really? We can't? All right. I had to like charm them or something to try and get me to redo everything. So we end up getting into the classes together. And then, of course, I'm the one that finishes, and he's just like, I'm over it. I'll go learn it in a restaurant. I'm like,
well, where does it take you from there? You finish at Texas Culinary. Do you decide to jump to New York City right away?
Yeah, well, again, I was looking for a move, and in this brief moment of a year discovering passion in cooking, Austin was great. Austin had great food, but if I was already living there, I thought about using this externship that you have to do at the end of your schooling to go somewhere, wherever. And I had a friend out in Chicago, and I was like, maybe I'll send out a bunch of resumes over there, and I could like stay with my friend. He could like help jumpstart everything. But then on some wild note, I walking out of school one day, and I found a box. I stepped over a box of matches that said Tribeca Grill, and I was like, this is interesting. And I looked into it, and it was in New York City. And it was attached to Robert De Niro's name. And I was like, let me look into this. And I sent one resume out to them. And then I still remember Michael Sobelman he was a sous chef, executive sous chef or sous chef. And he calls me, he's like, yeah, you want to come out here? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to come out. New York City, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, what do you need from me? He's like, well, let me get you in touch with the executive chef, and we'll see what we can do. And it's like, all right. It's like I waited around, like executive chef is always too busy to do anything. So Michael calls me again, and he's like, yeah, well, the job's yours. Just want to make sure you're not going to screw us. And, we got the shift waiting for you, and you don't show up. I'm like, I'll be there. If you give me a job, I'll make sure I'm in New York City. So I had to come up, and I got here like 4 days before that, rented a hotel, and then just kind of, wow. I didn't know anybody. I rented a hotel and had the job, and I was like, well, as long as I can make money, I can eventually figure out where to live. And I had to like live in Newark for a year.
So you just basically showed up on the first day of your job, and you'd been in New York less than a week?
I showed up 2 to 3 days before, but yeah, I knew I had this job. So like the first day I was walking around New York City with my dad, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, why do you want to do this? I was like, I don't know, Pops. Like, it's going to be fine. Meanwhile, we're standing at, like, Union Square, 14th Street, right? And it's just a bunch of, like, kids out. It's, like, May. And it just looks, for us, suburbia, El Paso, far from New York people, it's like, this seems crazy, son. I'm like, I think it's going to be fine.
Thank God you stepped over that matchbook.
Yeah, right.
Like, they were just leaving matchbooks by the stairs to all these culinary schools over the United States. They're like, oh, thank God that matchbook thing really worked. We landed another kid. He found it at Texas Culinary.
Helped another one.
Yeah, exactly. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk more about New York and cooking with Chef Eduardo Sandoval from Tygershark. We'll be right back.
New York chefs and restaurants are proud of the food they put on the table. And serving produce that comes from local, environmentally responsible farms is a way to leave an even better taste in everyone's mouth. So when shopping for your ingredients, look for the New York State Grown and Certified seal. It lets you know which food is grown right here in New York State, certifying the food that comes from local farms that meet a higher standard. You'll not only be serving local food, you'll be supporting local farmers. Learn more about the New York State Grown and Certified program at certified.ny.gov.
Welcome back to The Line, everyone. I wanted to remind you that The Line and all the other fantastic shows on Heritage Radio are available on heritageradionetwork.org, as well as iTunes and Stitcher. If you're into that podcast thing, you can download them and you can listen to them whenever you want, on the train, in the car, on the bike. Take them with you. Please go and check out some past episodes of all the great shows on Heritage Radio Network. We just celebrated our 10,000th episode last week, so that was very exciting, and they all live on the site, so you can go check out all those past episodes. I'm here with Chef Eduardo Sandoval. He's the executive chef of Tygershark in Prospect Heights. He was born in El Paso, and he has worked at many restaurants in New York. He had a pop-up called El Bronquito for a while that led to him ending up, I believe, meeting Doug Wang, who is the first-time restaurant owner of Tygershark.
Correct.
I want to talk about how that came to be. How does a guy who's never run a restaurant decide to open up a restaurant in Prospect Heights? How did you guys meet? And how did you decide on what the format would be? And all those other million things that go into how a restaurant comes to become alive.
Well, I've known Doug Wang for a couple years before leading up to this whole venture. And I was running a restaurant called Miller's Tavern in Brooklyn, which was maybe officially my first restaurant that I was at the helm of, as far as like menu design and running the kitchen, and it even bled into like front of the house work, just overseeing everything. And he was a regular there. We're like situated like 2 corners down from Walter Foods, which was like always the busiest part of Williamsburg. And so we would catch the carryover. Like if they were at a long wait, they'd come wait at Miller's, and we did this really gnarly bogus thing called dollar oysters, and with no real oyster shucker at the time. And so he would frequent there, and just by the charm that Miller's Tavern was, in the people that he met and what he experienced out of that, I think it was something that he wanted to encapsulate and have for himself. And then, fast forward 2-3 years from that encounter was running into him at our local spots, and then we just had like very much mutual friends, and so we were just always running into each other, and he would tell me about his project that he was opening up, and he had a consult chef that was helping him, but he really needed another chef that was going to stay and run it for him, and we developed a relationship through that. It was while I was doing my pop-ups, and I was like, I don't know if I'm really want to go work for somebody right now, but that's when the magic happened. When he started helping me at some of the pop-ups. It was just like how he courted me, I would say. Just
like getting down, seeing if you guys kind of vibe together, seeing if you can turn that into a working relationship. Yeah,
because if you can't work next to the cook, it's like, what's the point? Right. Because it's just going to be buddying. We had to be able to dance together.
The sort of the feel of Tygershark, it hits you right at the front window for the people that haven't been there yet. It's got a really big glass facade. It's got a cool neon lighting in the front, and then you come in and you're like, oh, I think I might be in the wrong spot. I'm not sure if I'm in the restaurant. Am I at the restaurant? Because it has a shop in front. It has coffee, and it has some like surfboards vibe stuff that you can buy, like wax and things of that nature, right? So and then you come back into the restaurant, and in my opinion, it is not a detriment to the restaurant at all. It's cool. It feels like you're like sneaking into somewhere, like you're discovering the restaurant every time. Did the design? Did you have anything to do with the design of the restaurant? And I'm curious also about how you decided to break up the back room. For people that have never been there, I still want to have a little bit of a visual discussion because it's cool. It's like there's like a bit of like this private dining room, and there's a chef counter. It's like you hit all the things that you're supposed to do with a restaurant in a very small space by breaking it up and making it feel intimate. How did you guys go about the design? And if someone helped, who was it?
Well, I would attribute most of that to Doug and having his idea of how he wanted things to work, and he had the concept and the idea, and I came in shortly after the plans were already drawn up and they had everything kind of laid out. So as far as that layout part, I don't know how much but it wasn't really me. It was him and the architect. But Doug did come from a retail background, like he was in fashion, and he's more familiar with that stuff, and that was something that, in a leap of faith, he thought, wanted to try something new and different. Like, that's not something you normally find in a restaurant. And that, like you said, you peel back the curtain that we just put up, and you see this restaurant, and it just seems like a wonderful discovery. So that was all intentional on his part, and then the aesthetic, the look, a lot of it has been him and his architect.
And you've got this big open kitchen. It's like a dine-in bar counter, but it faces the kitchen, really.
Right.
How's that work for you?
That's great, and I think when most people come in and they see me at the helm and I'm like in the middle, they think that it was my thought out plan to just have this stage for myself as I like just sling these dishes to people. But it was really something that was already set, and when I came on, I had to figure out how, because there was so much equipment. It was actually supposed to be 2 times as big, kitchen equipment wise, and I was like, there's no way I can run a kitchen for this many people with all this equipment. So I had to do the opposite of what most chefs would do. Is like give some really nice stuff away. I was like, no.
Like, we don't need all this stuff,
this great,
man.
this beautiful convection oven. No, let's get that later or something. 2 fryers? I'll just do it with 1.
The hardest decision ever. Be like, oh, new equipment to return? Why?
But I had to scale back the kitchen and make it a little more like feasible. And then the bar was actually a little bit of an afterthought. And I tried to situate it the best so that it does create more of a platform. It is like a stage, and then set the lighting almost accordingly. But it is a very raw experience as to like, you can't. I mean, I'm not gonna not yell at somebody if I need to, and I'm not gonna like, tiptoe around a kitchen and not do the work that we need to do. But at the same time, it is very much an intimate thing, and there's customers sitting there and they're like hawking at you, and I don't know if they're like really watching because they like what they're seeing, or it's like they're waiting for their food too long. It's like
I've always felt that the open kitchen is like a double-edged sword because it gives the customer what they think they want, which is insight into what happens in the back kitchen, but it seems to stretch time for them. Like a 1-minute normal wait is a 5-minute wait. If you can see what's going on in the kitchen, you're like, yes, that's my chicken. What? That's someone else's chicken? Like, yes, that's my. Oh, who's getting all this food right now?
Chicken? Where
is my chicken? Right, and so that can cause sort of like the kitchen isn't allowed to work at its own pace, right? Because you're not operating as a kitchen, you're operating partly as a show, which I think can be really stressful for some people in the kitchen. It seems like you've been able to deal with it and handle it and sort of embrace it. How do you convey that to your cooks? Like, look, they can see everything you do. Like, don't take off your hat in the kitchen because someone's going to see it and be like, that guy took off his hat. Like, he's, like the smallest things, someone can catch it and be interpreted. You can wash your hands 50 times a day, and the one time you touch someone's raw chicken with your hand to see if it's cooked yet, they're like, you touched my food with your hand. It's like, how else do you think we cook it? But so how do you kind of convey to the folks in your kitchen, like, look, this is our cooking environment. This is how we operate. It takes some getting used to, right?
Yeah, it definitely takes getting used to. And it's like initially when you're giving them the walkthrough and the trail, you just have to make it a point that, like, try and look good and just know that people are watching you. And if there's anything that you can just step off the line and kind of like do something that you don't want other people to see. You got an itch on your nose, just like
gather yourself behind a closed door.
You can't even squat because they can still see you. It's a very open and intimate kitchen.
Nowhere to hide.
No. And you also have to kind of find you have to hire the right people as well. Sure,
that definitely plays into it. When you talk about hiring and you talk about visibility, and I also want to know how does your current position influence your choices to source? And I want you to talk a little bit about Doug's background, because his family was in fish for 30 years. I want to know if that plays into the restaurant at all. But when you're making these decisions as an executive chef, all right, I'm hiring this person, I'm sourcing from here, I'm going to put this on the menu. How do you just organize your brain every single day as being in charge of the restaurant? Do you keep lists? Do you have like a running kind of brain note that's like, all right, today I'm tackling this, tomorrow I'm gonna like figure out that? How do you manage all those different things?
It's well, to start real quick, I would say a lot. Like one of my best friends is a musician, and we've gone back and forth to like challenge one another. And one of the things I take away from his career is like producing. And I never really understood what it was until like talking to him. And I was like, so who gets all the credit for what happens here? I said, well, the producer does most of the stuff. Like he'll make the most money. You get the artist, but the guy who's producing it really. So I've approached it in that way, where I'm going to hire somebody who has strengths that play into my weaknesses. But in the overall scheme of things, it's going to be, they're going to help in the areas that I can't always like find time for. They're gonna do like the legwork. They're gonna like assist with like creativity, and it's a great outlet. We can like all work together, and the overall goal is like the bending of rules and the unique things that we try and come up with at Tygershark. And then everything is lists. I love writing things out instead of just having like printouts and check a box. Like I'll have my list of every ingredient that needs to go into a dish in the order of how the dish is built up. And then you kind of like sit down at the end of each shift and go over it in my head, and then you have your cooks, and because it's open, you can just like check everything off there, and it's almost like it's meditative, and you sit down for like an hour and you write everything out and you strategize your next day. And I find that if you prepare well enough at night, it sets you up for a great morning.
Have you found other places that are kind of blending flavors the way that you do? You're doing a Korean, at first glance, it's a Korean menu.
Correct.
When you look underneath, when you see the ingredients, when you think about the thought process that's going into them, it is not traditional, nor is it built necessarily only upon the foundation of Korean flavors. Mm-hmm. So it's an exciting thing to eat for the consumer, and I hope and I assume it's exciting for all you guys to cook. But where do you see? How far do you see that being able to go for you?
That's actually a terrifying question because I don't know. The menu we've been doing right now has been going for a year, and I haven't tried to mess with it too much because it is unique and people do really enjoy it, but there is more to explore as far as the Korean aspect of things. So in this slow time of January, hopefully we'll put some good effort into unravel, like getting into more Korean dishes and then just kind of like putting our spin to it. But going back to his family, the seafood is always a strong part of it because that's like where he comes from, the seafood and the Korean aspect. And those always play a huge role into how I would approach any of the dishes. Whereas Korean food isn't just limited to seafood. There's a lot of like, there's like the steamed pork belly that they call bosam, served as like with wraps, and they have like a lot of great barbecue. But it does in the theme and in how I've like developed the uniqueness is every dish should have a seafood or a seafood component to it, and that becomes the foundation. And then I try and find like another dish, another Korean dish, and like make it once, and which is how we did everything. Like we started with a test kitchen, and we used that. Like I tested on other people who were familiar with the food, and when you learn the food well enough, is then when you can like really manipulate. And then because I don't know Korean food well enough, I'm never going to be able to make it authentically. So I'm never going to try and hold that standard for myself. I'm just going to be like, look, I'm going to interpret this Korean food with what I'm excited about, which is like a lot of bold Mexican flavors.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Are you heavily influenced by the actual Korean food, or I guess by that, do you eat a lot of Korean food and then say to yourself, there's an idea in there? Or do you kind of just look from afar and maybe read about a Korean dish and say, I'm going to jump off from that? Because those are two very different ways to be inspired, right? You can just say, well, I know what this sort of like porridge dish is. I know what this seafood broth might be. I know what this noodle dish may be. And then, or you could eat it 20 times at 20 different places and let it kind of really shape what your idea of it is, and then go from there. How do you build your ideas?
Well, it's very much, I enjoy eating the Korean food. And I didn't know anything about Korean food, and I out in Flushing is where Doug would take me to show me dishes that he grew up with, ones that he'd find are like the most flavorful, the most on point to what his mom would make. And it was kind of, I kind of dove in almost like a method actor would, and I just did everything Korean in many aspects, and like even learning the words and the accent to it. And then I thought I could go in there and just be like, oh, let me take this concept of what a rice and use my experience as like a cook, and I'll just kind of like be weird with it, thinking it'd be successful, and it wasn't. And I developed these test kitchens before we opened up Tygershark, and for like 6 months, 8 to 6 months, we would invite his friends over. And I say his friends because he has a lot more Korean, Asian friends than I've ever had. I didn't know anybody, and except Doug. And we would make these dishes, and he would throw an idea out at me, and then I would just kind of like do whatever weird stuff I'd want to do with it, and we would play off each other, and then we'd make it for his friends. And the reason why I'd want to make it for his friends because they were familiar with it. There was like we get like 8 people who grew up with a similar flavor palette and a way of like how to eat noodles, because the way they eat noodles is very different than the way an Italian would eat noodles. How much sauce do they want on it? And it was really like a research on like another culture, and how without having to leave New York, without having to leave America, I was tapping into like whatever resources I could for ethnic cuisine that I was so removed from. And then when I can appease them was then when I can know how to make the product that they would like, and then I can like kind of like turn it into my own, which I kind of called bastardize it, because it's Korean food, but no Korean would ever be like, oh yeah, that's good Korean food. They'd be like, that's nice.
So at the pop-ups, were you immediately met with like resistance, sort of like oh, good try, but not great? Or were people like, oh wow, you've taken something that my grandmother made and this is nothing like it, but I'm into it? Where were the emotions falling on the spectrum?
It was definitely a lot of all of those things. A lot of like people would recognize it. Other people would be like, it's pretty good, but nice try. Not really Korean. Like,
did they think it was messed up that you were not a Korean person trying to like redo these dishes from their childhood, these classic dishes in a weird way?
Yeah, they would. No one was ever offended. They did. I always kind of opened up to him and be like, look, just give me your strongest criticism. I'm not gonna go like cry or get mad. But yeah, many people were like this, like, yeah, this isn't really like what I thought it would be. Like, there was 2 people that I know specifically that like really laid into me, and they were like really open with their criticism, but it helped shape my understanding of what can happen. And because me, I'm like, oh yeah, I want the sauce to be like super tight, like look pretty. The rice cakes will stack ever so whatever. But then one of them was like, no, that's not how tteokbokki is. You gotta like, it's gotta be like saucy. I was like, all right, but not soupy. Whereas they would know, they're more familiar with this rice cake dish being very soupy. I was like, I'll give you more sauce, but I'm not gonna go soupy because it just doesn't look as attractive. And it was kind of like that tempering of what people expect versus what I was like trying to conceptualize, and it was like more of a meeting ground where they can kind of connect and identify with, like, it can still remind them of a childhood dish.
Eduardo, thanks for joining us here on the line. It was really cool to hear about everything that's going on at Tygershark. Tell everybody the address of it so they can go check it out.
Tygershark is in Prospect Heights at 581 Vanderbilt Avenue, and hope to see you soon.
Open for dinner and brunch?
We do dinner 5:30 to 11. We do brunches from 12 to 3:30.
Everybody go check it out, Tygershark. Eduardo, thanks again. This has been The Line. We'll see you next Tuesday, 11 a.m. here on Heritage Radio.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.
Hey, are you hungry? Well, you're in luck. Meat and 3 is back for season 16. I'm Taylor Early, and we've got a whole new batch of reporters I am so excited to introduce you to.
Hi,
there.
I'm Elizabeth Fisher.
Asha McElroy.
Sam Girardi.
Jessica Gingrich.
Hannah from Wisconsin.
I'm a swing dancing audio engineer.
I am a future registered dietitian nutritionist.
I'm from New York, and I love rice and beans.
My favorite food of all time is a shrimp burrito.
I love watermelon.
We've also got a bonus podcast for you called Behind the Internship. 3 of our reporters will take you along to show how they develop stories for this very show, Meat and 3.
Hi, I'm Danielle Flitter, a plant-based chef from Philadelphia, living in Mexico City.
I'm Sophia Hooper. I'm a bartender based in Portland, Maine.
My name is Addison Austin Liu. I am a chef and food journalist from Salt Lake City, Utah, and my favorite food is Peruvian.
Rice and beans.
Hand-drawn noodle soup.
So tune in to enjoy a square meal for your ears. And I hope you saved a little room for dessert.